Hi, I'm Dorothea Shields, and I want to say hello to all of our Hilltop family and welcome you to Wednesday night home group for the month of April. We are going to be talking about Jesus's 7 I am statements that are mentioned in the book of John, in the Gospel of John. And there are 7 of them, and I want us to look at each one and discuss in our home group how those I am statements apply to our lives and what Jesus is saying through them. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one we're going to look at is John chapter 6, verse 35. And this is where Jesus said, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst. And so I want to go back and give you a little bit of context so that you'll understand in what were the circumstances in which Jesus made that statement. So if we go back to the previous chapter, you see that Jesus did the miracle of feeding the 5,000 with the bread and the fish. And so then the next day, these same people, they were out and looking for Jesus and they couldn't find him. They finally did locate him and they went to where he was seeking another miracle, seeking something else. And actually, Jesus says to them in verse 26, he said, most assuredly, I say to you, you seek me not because you saw the signs, because see, the signs were meant to be a testimony of who Jesus is. But they weren't seeing that sign. And he says, but you ate the loaves and were filled. So they are actually thinking of everything in a physical manifestation. They were physically hungry. Jesus gave them physical food. But the point of the miracle was not only to demonstrate the power of God to multiply and to provide, but it was also to show them that Jesus himself is the bread of life that sustains life. And so he was trying to get them to understand that. Then directly after he was speaking to the people, then he started talking and having a discussion with the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were talking to them about manna from heaven and the manna that God gave when the children of Israel were in the wilderness. And so I want to talk just a sec about that because it ties in and gives us an additional aspect of what Jesus was saying. So first of all, manna was given as food from God every day during the 40 years of the wandering in the wilderness. It was given fresh every morning and it had to be gathered up every day. God gave it, but individuals had to go out and receive it and pick it up. Jesus is the manna from heaven. That's basically what he's trying to get across to the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. And that relationship with him fills the hunger of our spirit man and sustains life. So for more of that, read John 6:22 through 35, and that will fill you in. Okay, so the next one that I want us to talk about and discuss in our groups is John 8:12. Then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. And so again, in this context of who Jesus is talking to and what he does, he is indicating something in the physical that represents a spiritual principle. Now, when he actually said this was at the instance of the woman who was caught in adultery, which somewhat doesn't make sense until you get actually to the next situation that happens, because that is when Jesus healed the blind man who had been born blind. And So you go over to chapter 9 and you can read about the context of the man who was born blind and then he was healed. Jesus repeats in chapter 9 and verse 5, he says again, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And so he healed the blind man to demonstrate that that we are all actually born blind because we are born sinful. And our spiritual blindness is because of our sin. But Jesus is the one who heals us and takes away that blindness, that spiritual blindness, because he is the light of the world. So it's really interesting. I love this story when you read about what the Pharisees and their reaction to this whole situation was. It is a very strong illustration of spiritual blindness. And we know that this is meant to be a spiritual principle because of, at the very end in verse 41, Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin, but now you say, we see, therefore your sin remains. So in your discussion, I want you to read John 1:4 and discuss how that verse relates to these two I am statements. I am the bread of life and I am the light of the world. And how does the bread of life sustain us in our everyday lives? How does it relate to the giving of manna? And how does the light of the world transform the way we see life? And I want you to consider Matthew 5, verses 14 through 16, and 1 John 1, 5 through 7. I hope and pray that you have a wonderful discussion, and I will see you next week.